future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey everybody, welcome. It is Monday, February 14th, 2022. Yes, this is part 2 of our Valentine's Day doubleheader. Of course, earlier today we had Stephen Caruso on from the Pennsylvania Capital Star talking about redistricting and fights ahead, what's going on in the Supreme Court, giving us a little history up in there. And tonight we've got one of my favorite guests that we've had on recently is Diana Leygerman's back on the show. So you're in for a good one here, folks. Yes, this is Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards and across the country. On Fridays, of course, we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And check out the Wednesday show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril's a progressive columnist for the Bucks County Courier-Times, the Intelligencer, and now the Bucks County Beacon, too, as well. And every kind of couple weeks or so, Cyril joins me to break down what's happening in the Bucks County, in Pennsylvania, and in international politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And you can also support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/allrcpress and choose your membership level. You can also help out the show right now by heading over to our YouTube channel. And as if you're not there already, smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so every time that we go live. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, make sure you hit us that 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. You can also join our Discord server. Info on that is in today's show notes if you want to continue the conversation all week long. And for more PA Progressive Talk, you can tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. every night. And you can find it on YouTube, Twitter, basically wherever you find streaming content, Rick is there. Head on over to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out his live call-in show, WBAI of New York, over the weekends. It's really awesome. And you got to check out Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast you haven't already. Season 2 is officially launched. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. All you gamers out there, The Game In, that's with 2 N's. The Game In is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, you get the deal. And look, kids, they get a discount for every A on the report card. Can't beat that. Check them out on their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at The Game In. That's with 2 N's. And if you've got a question about a game, you look for something hard to get, you shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And a special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayMan. Again, 2 N's. That's at SongADayMan on Twitter. Well, on tonight's show, like I said, I welcome Diana Leygerman back to the show. Diana is a writer, teacher, activist, and former Central Bucks School Board candidate. In another example of how elections have consequences, this past week, the Central Bucks School Board, dominated by increasingly right-wing members, canceled a field trip to the National Holocaust Museum and other sites in Washington, D.C. Why? Well, turns out D.C. had a strict vaccine and mask mandates, and that was just too much for the anti-mask snowflakes to handle. And as it turns out, the son of one of the school board members was supposed to be on that field trip, but he's not vaccinated. Oh, so means everybody can't go, right? Yeah, there you go. Another perfect example of board members exerting the extremist views with consequences for all the children in the district. Where was the concern for those kids when we're talking about LGBTQ students or disabled students during the pandemic? That's interesting. Well, Diana Leygerman pointed all this out on Twitter, and her tweet went nuts. That's right. Over 90,000 people viewed her tweet, which helped bolster continued organizing among parents, students, and community members, led to a series of newspaper articles drawing attention to what was happening back on Central Bucks, and looking forward to get a lay of the land in Central Bucks. Diana, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, so first I got to say, we just give us a little timeline here. So we had a school board meeting. It was like last Tuesday, I believe, right? That's Tuesday the
Right.
8th. And there was supposed to be, now this wasn't the entire district, right? It was one school, right?
Mm-hmm.
One ninth grade class with 280 plus students that were supposed to go on this field trip to Washington, D.C., which has been a fairly standard part of Central Bucks field trips, as I understand.
Right.
But this time it seemed that they didn't want to go because they were worried that kids might not be able to use the bathroom. Is that actually the kind of excuses that they were giving about why they're going to cancel this trip?
Yes, they were concerned about kids who are not vaccinated because of the mandates in DC for what they will do during free time between the museums that have been planned.
So, just what they're. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, I can't, like, I've been trying to, like, I'm trying to kind of, like, serious, but this is like, this seemed to be one of the reasons why. Let me just step back one bit. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because when this story broke, when your tweet came out, then we saw these newspaper articles came here. I literally had echoing in my brain, right? Elections have consequences here. This is
Mm-hmm.
what we get. It's not just the big issues, all the nonsense battles over CRT and all this stuff. But when you put anti-mask and these kind of conspiratorial people that are inside our school boards, you have consequences big and small for our kids. And it seems that it's only when it affects their specific kids, right? The ones that are going to be affected by this, that they care. When it
Right.
came to actually putting immunocompromised kids at risk, disabled kids at risk, when it comes to kind of threatening or creating a culture of fear for LGBTQ kids, then it's not a
Mm-hmm.
concern,
Correct.
right?
Right. Yeah, so and that's the hypocrisy of it all, right? They had no problems telling immunocompromised children, you can just stay home because we don't want to wear masks. So if you feel uncomfortable, stay home. You can do remote learning, right? Um, they have no problems pulling books that LGBTQ plus kids can see themselves in, right? But then they call discrimination of the unvaccinated, which, by the way, as we both know, is a choice, right? Discrimination doesn't work with choice.
Right.
Discrimination works with things that you cannot change, you cannot choose.
Well, and I think this has been one of the most frustrating parts about this double standard, right? It's like, if you want to grant people, say, the option, right? Say, okay, look, it's your responsibility. It's your choice to say you're not going to get vaccinated. It's your choice to say that you're not going to wear a mask. You don't want to do those things, that's fine. However, right, with that becomes a responsibility on the other side of that. Right? It
Hmm.
means that if you're not going to wear a mask, well, then you can't put yourself in situations where you could potentially expose other people. If you're not going to get vaccinated, then guess what? You have to submit to testing, whatever you are, or if you take extra precautions. And you're willing, assumably, you're willing to accept the consequences for your actions because if you stand on principle. And if that means your kid can't go on a school trip, well, then so be it.
Of course, but the problem is that, consequences, they don't want to accept the consequences, right? When we all make choices, we obviously all made the choice whether or not to vaccinate our children and to get the vaccine ourselves. I chose to vaccinate my children. And I knew that I would have to accept any consequence that came from that, whether they might have a bad reaction to it, maybe they would have side effects to it, maybe there would be some sort of reaction that would be horrific. But I knew that that was the choice that I was making, and I would have to accept those consequences, right? But on the other end is I don't want to make this choice, and I don't want to accept the consequences of anything. And on top of it all, I'm going to then hurt other children
Right.
by canceling, whatever that may be. In this case, this trip.
Right. And I want to be clear I'm about to say something, and I want to be clear that I'm not making an accusation here for when I'm saying about people's intentions for things. But it seemed to me that given the kind of vitriol that has been kind of part and parcel of some of the Central Bucks school board meetings of late, especially
Mhm.
when you had some community members that were making unbelievable anti-Semitic comments. They were making all sorts of kind of nonsense claims, kind of racial claims, inflammatory claims. That a trip to Washington, D.C. for museums like the Holocaust Museum, stuff like that, that would have been an extraordinary experience for those students, right? Because
Of course.
it brings them into that context to really thinking about these, these conversations that seem to be so kind of like explosive in our communities and our school boards, it puts in a very, very different context when you're actually kind of asked to immerse yourself in that history. And so it seems to be like a double loss here, right? Not only is it just that they get an educational field trip, but it was a meaningful one given the context of what these discussions have been about.
Of course. And, maybe if the children did go to the Holocaust Museum, they would see that all the comparisons to masking and vaccine requirements to the Holocaust are completely false and, offensive. And, when you see the atrocities at the museums, you can't possibly then go back home and say, yeah, you're right. A vaccine mandate is like the Holocaust, right? That wouldn't be, I can't imagine that anyone would see what happened in the Holocaust and then come back home and say, yep, you're right. Right. So
exactly. I'm thinking about, I mean, we visited the Holocaust Museum kind of years ago. And there's that or I actually, when I used to live in DC is probably kind of when I first went there, and there's that one hallway where you have all the shoes that are kind of filling up that room, and just that kind of immersive experience and the horror of that once you're sitting there. I remember that visceral experience, and then you're, put that in context of what you're looking around here, what the comparisons are. It seems like, wait a minute.
Yeah, like even you saying it, I have goosebumps just like
Ditto.
remembering.
Yep.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's just really sad that was taken away, and instead, Dorney Park was suggested.
That blew my mind. Here, I mean, this is.
You can't compare the two, Kevin.
I mean, this was. I had to go back and reread this because I'm like, wait a minute, this can't be. And to say that, well, maybe they could do something else. Maybe they could go to, here it is. I'm going to mispronounce her name. It's Lisa Sissio. Is that how you say her name?
Yes.
Lisa Sissio kind of made these comments, right? And says, I think we're discriminating against children who are not vaccinated. She said that during the board meeting, right? Discriminating against those children. She says, well, I love Washington, D.C., she said. And she suggested administrators find an alternative option for the March 31st trip. This is, quote, frankly, they could go to Doherty Park and learn about roller coasters. I mean, this is the Philadelphia Inquirer. This is kind of like they're kind of posting this. And I'm like, I mean, does this not even resonate? I mean, I almost thought she was saying that like as just a really horrid joke, but to say like, okay, our kids could just go have fun instead of thinking about this horrible stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, why not both? If you want to go to Dorney, you can do it as well.
I'm the last person that's going to be against Dorney Park, right?
Exactly. Like we can do both, but you can't take away this experience, especially since it's been tradition at the school for a really long time, and the kids have been looking forward to it. And it was just like such a flippant move, like people are not vaccinated, discrimination. Like, discrimination doesn't work that way. I keep wanting to stress that. Like, discrimination is against something you cannot change, right? Your race, your sex, your gender identity, all these things. And the vaccine status is not one of those things.
No,
and that just drives me crazy.
No, and I have, what's one of these things, and this is kind of a little kind of off topic, but it is one of these things where for years we keep on hearing about, how the left, right? However they define that, right, in these spaces,
Right.
or how people of color or how women are just too sensitive, right? That they're little snowflakes that anytime that they're offended, they'll just kind of melt away because their feelings are hurt. Right. And then this has been kind of like a call for anti-political correctness stuff about why people should be able to say what they want. And then here, right, it's like the flip side of it. It's like you're basically saying, look, you make a choice, you move on, and but because you don't want to wear a mask on your kind of delicate little face, right, that somehow we're all supposed to kind of collapse around and say, oh my God, poor little Jimmy, right, or whoever. But you said it's like, no, this is a choice. It's night and day between like what these, I don't know. It's just that, I guess it's just that hypocrisy just drives me insane.
Well, yeah. And, they ran on school or on parental choice, right? So, but I mean, listen, we all knew that when they run on parental choice, it's their parental choice. It's not everyone's parental choice, and it's clear and obvious at every single board meeting, and the hypocrisy is frustrating, to put it mildly. So yeah, it's frustrating.
It's frustrating, and I was also surprised to see that we saw a 7-1 decision to cancel the trip too as well. I
Hmm.
mean,
Right.
that was. I mean, you go, God, this is. I would have expected. Look, there's always going to be somebody who's going to have their own personal interest, right? And they're going to kind of blow it up
Of
as if it's
course.
for everybody. That's just kind of like human nature and
Right.
stuff. But I
Hmm.
was actually a bit taken back, and this is where I kept on saying, "Yep, elections have consequences here." When you kind of overload the board, and because you create a sense of not only do you have a bunch of people that are driving the agenda, but there's a social pressure now that's involved to other people that are on the board to kind of go along
Right.
with decisions because you don't want to rock the boat.
Oh, well, yeah, and I mean, they will always vote it by party. And we saw that, like I said, from the very beginning, as soon as they took office, and now they mostly don't even talk at the meetings, because they don't have to, right? They just vote how they want to and they move along. There's no discussion of any kind. If another member tries to have a discussion, they will not have one. They will like shoot them down. So, and that's what it is. But what happens is with this particular vote, it seemed to me, particularly, is that they already knew how they're going to vote. And she wanted to pontificate, like, and tell everyone this is why she's going to vote this way. So the people that have supported her, she's basically like, yes, you're right. Like, thank you for being on our side, right? It was like a performative action for
Yep.
her supporters and those who voted in. But the rest of them already knew how they were going to vote. But on top of it all, she provided misinformation, which is why I think another board member voted against the trip that otherwise would have voted for the trip, right? She said kids wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom. Well, of course, nobody would want to put any child in that kind of a situation, right?
Exactly.
But that wasn't true. Like it was like she just kept providing all of this misinformation. And obviously, like I feel like if I was there too on the board and I was told kids wouldn't be able to go eat or go to the bathroom, I'd be like, "Oh my God, of course not."
No,
Meanwhile,
right. Because you're just
you
putting
know,
yourself in that
right,
situation. You're like,
exactly. That
oh
would
God,
be awful.
this
You
could
would
be
never want to
right.
put any child in that
Totally.
situation, of course. So, and then we realized, oh wow, that's not even true. The assistant superintendent says like we worked it all out, like no one's gonna have an issue, and she just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and then they all voted as they were going to vote anyway, and tricked others to vote
Yeah, and
anyway.
that's a way of also giving the constituents their talking points too as well. So
Right.
now they walk away, and this is what they're going to say to everyone else. Well, meanwhile, I know this is a little obscure for a lot of those folks who can be on the board, but there was a place they could have gone to figure out what was actually true at that point. There's this little thing you might have heard of it called Google, right, where you
Mm,
can actually kind
I
of
have
look
heard of
up.
that. Hmm.
Oh my God, yeah, no, it's a little bit but that was remarkable. I mean, that was one of the first things I did. I'm like, wait a minute, do you have to have like? I said, I don't remember there being like vaccine mandates for these things in DC. Let me go look that. I'm like, no, and they
Yeah.
say it right on their websites because people that's the first thing that they're thinking of, right? What do I need to know if I'm going to come to visit Washington DC? That's the first question anybody who's going to bring a
Of
field trip's going to
course.
have. And
Right.
there it
Of
goes.
course.
No.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, all you had to do was look it up. And so, like I said, either they were all just, they had no idea what they were talking about, or she was intentionally bringing misinformation to take the vote, to vote it down, basically. And despite what anyone says, like, well, they didn't vote it down, they put it on hold until they figure something out. No, it was on the agenda. They voted it down. The board did not approve the trip. That essentially means that it is canceled.
Well, that's crazy. Well, now we should say now because this just came up just today,
Hmm.
right? That I believe, and you tweeted this out just kind of like probably like an hour ago, I think, right? It's
Hmm.
like so now
Hmm.
we have a new announcement kind of got posted that says, "Oh, well, the mayor of DC now announced that the city will end its proof of vaccination mandate. So prior to today's announcement, the city's vaccination mandate status and potential impact on accessibility for students and chaperones was factored into decisions. Now, I guess we have to put it back on the table,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. I mean, they don't have to technically, but
They
they
don't
could.
have to."
Yeah.
I just found it very interesting, right? So that you
Yeah.
have, here you go. And so now what's going to happen, right? Now
Hmm.
what's going to be the excuse,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I can't imagine that they would vote it down this time around because there would be literally no legitimate excuse, because then we could make assumptions, and I'm sure they don't want the assumptions flying around. So I'm just concerned that this trip was voted down based on no actual reason,
Right.
because the mandates weren't really in place. The kids would be able to go to the bathroom. They would be able to eat wherever they needed to eat. The museums didn't have requirements. So the only thing I'm thinking is either it's a mask thing, right? Because you still would have to mask in the museum, and they didn't just come out and say that because they don't want masks, obviously. Or it's the fact that they just don't want to support places that have any type of mandates, right? Um, so that's where I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean that's what it looks like at this point. I mean it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next, because it's
Hmm.
if you're saying okay, it's one thing, it sounds reasonable, quote
Hmm.
unquote, right? If you're saying, well, look, we don't ask students to disclose their status. We consider it a privacy thing. We could put, even if we were to accept that, which I think is just nonsense to begin with, because you
Right.
require them to disclose their vaccination status on measles, on mumps, rubella, all the other required vaccinations. So okay, but let's put that nonsense aside. But that's taken off the table now. So what is it? Is it just going to be spite? Because Washington, D.C., right, is a Democratic kind of city that is still going to ask you to wear a mask?
Right.
Or is it just your like inability to wear a mask because you're like so delicate as a kind of like a human being that you don't want anybody to have to deal with it? I mean, what's it
Right.
going to be? That seems to be a much steeper climb to make that
Yeah.
argument. But now they're in a position where they're going to have to make it if they want to continue to cancel it.
Right. Right. Either way, I mean, like I said, they don't have to bring it up to a vote, but I imagine that the pressure is high enough that they would have to bring it up now. There are a lot of parents and kids who are disappointed about this trip. I know if I had a ninth grader, I definitely would be disappointed if the trip was canceled. I mean, I've been disappointed without having a ninth
Yeah.
grader. So,
I was disappointed. I don't even have kids in Central Bucks. I mean, it's
well,
like,
you know what's funny? I tweeted after the meeting, but like it was all over Facebook, like so many people
yeah.
were writing about it, but Twitter is like my platform of choice. I've always, as you know, I've used Twitter for a very, very long time, and I've been writing on it, and I've, grew quite a little bit of a following. I was surprised that it went like mini viral, but I'm glad that it did,
Yeah.
because it brought the necessary attention to what's going on. Where people, I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, it's just a selfish move, you know?
Right.
Like there was no, like you said in the beginning, there was never like Dorney Park. Do they think that all the kids with disabilities would be able to go? No, of course not. They don't even think about those kids. They're not even on their radar. If you want to say discrimination, that's discrimination. Whenever I plan field trips for my students, I make sure that all kids can go,
Right.
right? So I don't know.
It's pretty remarkable. It's pretty
It's
remarkable.
remarkable.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I have to say, this is the other thing that the other reason why I was glad that you could come on tonight for a bit, was I think it's important to consistently, like, I don't know, shine a light on these efforts, right? I mean, to shine a light on the fact that, look, we need to make sure that people are aware of these, whether it's a small decision or a large decision, that's a consequence of what goes on. And this is why I was so thrilled to see that, okay, you tweeted out about this stuff. And then, like you said, you have a little bit of following, and then this starts showing up in some of the newspaper coverage, right? And I think
Mhm.
there's a big lesson there for all of us who are trying to kind of stop the crazy, right? And really kind of bring some sort of sanity and kind of, I mean, I would even settle just like, okay, let's get back to a point where we're dealing with like facts and truths, right? And I mean, I'll obviously here we're a progressive show, right? We're going to push things kind of like kind of progressive. We're going to argue for those things, but I mean, just at the baseline of, if we're talking about school board members, can you decide at least on facts and not kind of hidden agendas and conspiracy theories and kind of this random stuff, do things that are going to be good for the kids?
That's a lot to ask for, Kevin, considering that they didn't
I
run on
understand.
facts. If you don't run on facts, you have no facts.
Right. Well, that's exactly it. Right. And it's, I think the question now that's kind of, I think, I mean, I'm sure these discussions are happening with kind of in your circles in Central Bucks, certainly happen in Penridge. I know it's happening all throughout Bucks County, not just Bucks County, but I think that we're a real critical space here because so many of these extremist politics were, kind of went for their trial run this past election, and I think it's only going to ramp up even more moving into 2022. So the more that we kind of, I think, shine a light on and highlight these examples of like, look, you see something on the school board, you say something, right?
Right.
And then
Yeah.
we organize around it.
I know. And it's a little frustrating because I have always been very vocal about for years, not way before I ran, and I think it's frustrating to me that I continue to do so because I'm used to it.
Mhm.
But, I know so many people who were upset by this that didn't speak up and didn't speak out, and they just talked among themselves. And I mean, listen, I get it. They came after me pretty hard when I, spoke out. Like, you're attacking children. Like, please. Like, I'm not attacking children. I'm a teacher. Like, children are my heart and soul. They're just trying to build a narrative that, they can't take accountability for themselves. But, of course, they come after you pretty hard. They go after your jobs. Like, I get it. I understand why people don't want to speak
Yeah.
up. That side is really, the way they do things is gross. I get it. But if we don't speak up and the only voices we hear are their voices, then we can't be upset at the end of the
Exactly.
day, and that's what happened with this election. Suddenly I hear people saying like, "Oh, we need to vote. We need to vote." I'm like, "Yes, where were you? Where were you in November?"
Like,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like, listen, I'm glad people are getting more involved. Like, every time the board makes this colossal mistake, we get more supporters, we get more
That's what you
people
need.
involved, which is kind of what happened to the other side, right? Like, the board was making these decisions they didn't like, so the other side was getting all like riled up. So maybe now it's our turn. So I mean, I'm kind of hoping that it's our turn.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think now it's just just the straight up organizing, and that's the kind of really what it comes down to. And I've had some really good conversations with folks that are doing this. It's step by step, and I hear the frustration you're talking about. I mean, matter of fact, I run into the same thing over and over again. I mean, I could go on and on about the degradation of my working life, right, over the
Mm-hmm.
years, and other people sharing in that same thing, and yet when it comes time to push back, it doesn't happen.
Right.
And I think, well, I'm hoping that we've all started to learn that lesson and started going to push back here.
Right.
Um, and I have to say, and I also, the other part of it too as well, there's a certain degree of saying, okay, it's time to kind of adult up on this one,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I have to say, I love the one tweet that you put out. You said, look, I teach high school. I'm not in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right, exactly. Like, I don't care about your fights. Like, I don't care about their petty fights.
Yep.
I don't care the names that they call me. Like, I truly do not care. They will not silence me because they called me a mean word. Like, I've been doing this. I've been speaking out for at least a decade at this point. And so the fact that one of them doesn't like what I have to say or, whatever, that has um no consequence to me. It really doesn't, because my goal isn't about them. Like, I don't care what they're doing. My goal is to make sure that my kids go to school in a district that has common sense people in place, right? That people who make decisions for my children, for all of our children, use their brains and use common sense and don't do things because they're politically motivated to do things because they want their friends to clap for them or whatever that may
Right.
be. Like, I don't care about this infighting. I'm not in high school. They act like they're in high school. That's on them. Like you said, I teach it. I have enough of it during the day. They wouldn't last a minute in my shoes. So
Right, exactly.
that's enough.
Exactly. Well, I'm so glad you put this out. I'm so glad that we were seeing this getting reported on and having traction. And at least the fact that, look, an email goes out that basically has to alert parents now that, oh, okay, wait, maybe we're going to be thinking about the DC trip over again. Maybe that's some indication that,
Wild, right? Then they
yeah, I
have
mean,
to
this
send
has
an
to have.
email saying like, "Oh, by the way, we'll talk about it later."
Yeah. Too. So let me just ask you this in a more broad sense beyond this. I mean, we're kind of, a few months out now from the election and stuff.
Mhm.
How are you seeing things pan out so far on the school board? And are there things that people in the community, people in Central Bucks, or even beyond that, should be paying attention to, or should have their, paying attention to at this point?
Yes. Well, and I said this today earlier, like pay attention to everything. And it's hard because these meetings are long. You have to get through a bunch of public comments, that are sometimes, unpleasant to listen to. But right now we're looking at like curriculum and policy, and they're gonna go after books. We could already see it. It's happening all over the country. It's coming
Right.
here to Central Bucks. Already at the last meeting, they were going against professional opinion with the library books that are in our libraries, right? Like the board, well, certain members of the board do not trust the professionals, the administrators, everyone who has kept our school one of the best districts in the state and
Yeah.
in the country. So suddenly they don't trust them and they think that they know better without having any experience in education or anything of the sort. And so we really need to be paying attention to what they're going to do with curriculum, because once they start pulling at curriculum, they will hurt our kids, because they're going to start taking away educational opportunities like trips to the Holocaust
Right.
Museum. They'll pull books about the Holocaust next, right? Like they did in other, I don't remember where it was, in a different state, where they pulled Mouse,
In
right?
Tennessee. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like that was so easy for them to do. It was just snap of the fingers, and they can do that here too. So my advice is to really pay attention, especially to the curriculum meetings. What's going on, who's saying what, and that's that.
So on those on the curriculum stuff, there does Central Bucks, is there kind of like for lack of a better word, like a season for curricular development? Like, is there a particular time which they start to, okay, at this point in the year, we're going to start looking at revisions for the following year? Or is this just kind of an ongoing process in which they will approach it?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I would assume that it's an ongoing process based on the meetings that I have heard.
Yeah.
Something comes up, there's a program that someone wants to add, there's a revisiting of summer school or summer reading, right? Like it's always kind of ongoing. I think at different parts of the year, different things get revisited. And right now their concern is with what's inside our libraries.
Yep. Well, this has certainly been the case in Penridge. I mean, this is where my kids are at. I mean, they have already pulled books off the shelves. I mean, books on, the kind of, books that have been around since the 70s, right? Where they're kind of like, opening up like, oh, what does it mean that this kid that's in the school has two mothers, right? Because this is, and that gets pulled from all the shelves right off the bat. I mean, in such blinding speed, before most parents in the district even know that there's it's on the agenda. It's because these folks are actually gunning. They already have their list of books. They already have their list of things that they're coming after. It has nothing to do with kind of grassroots response from parents who say, hey, you know what? This book was taught in this class. Maybe we should look at it. No, they're coming with.
Of course not, because no one's reading these books. No one's going to a library and reading through every single book. They already have passages that they want to call out. Someone is driving this effort that's way more powerful than any of us are. And then they are recruiting these parents locally under the pretense of we care about your children. You really should pay attention. And it's like that Moms for Liberty and all those groups, And so they call it these grassroots, but they're not. They're using, these powerful people are using local moms, local parents to lead these efforts because they can't be everywhere, right? So they are using the local parents to work for them. It's an interesting and a really effective strategy.
Well, it is. Last week we talked a little bit of this before the show tonight, as we had Amy Connect on last week. She's up in the Palisade School District, and she went to one of these Right for Bucks meetings and kind of reported on it and things like that. Kind of just it was an open meeting, right? Anybody could go, and they welcome everybody. They said they want people to come to this, and her main takeaway from that is look, they are incredibly organized, right? That they've already got their here's your toolkit. Right. Yes. So what to do next when people are angry? Well, then this is what you could do next. Here's how you run for office. Here's how this, and here's how you make it happen. This person over here will help you fill out the paperwork,
Yeah.
And that's really kind of we see this being reproduced right across the board. And we'll see where we go from here. Here.
I mean, it was the same thing with our election. They clearly had strategists and professionals, and we had us. So We had us figuring it out every step of the way.
Yeah. And and I think that parents in all these school districts, especially, like you said, Central Bucks had always been known as kind of one of the best districts around,
Yeah.
right? And I look at what's happening in some of the lagislation, the laws are being passed in different parts of the country right now, where they're
Hmm.
asking teachers to submit their lesson plans a year ahead of
Yeah.
time and all this. And people are just quitting. I mean, teachers are
Yep.
like, forget it. I'm done. It's like you
Hmm.
have no understanding of what being a teacher is if you think that producing lesson plans a year ahead will be anything but a lie.
Seriously. Seriously. Most of us don't know what we're teaching. Like, I mean, we know what we're teaching, but how it's gonna go, and the day to day changes based on what the students are up to. And so,
And which kids are in your classroom, right? Because
and
that
which kids
changes
are in the
every
class.
year, right?
Exactly. It's silly. But yeah, you're right. It's a playbook, and they all have it, and yeah,
There you have it.
and they're gonna push it through.
Well, you hear it. You're hearing it from Diana Leygerman here tonight. That pay attention to everything. That is your charge moving forward.
That is my organization. Pay attention to everything on the local level, because things can change really, really quickly, and most parents aren't involved at all.
Yeah, and I think that you've got to look. I love the model. In part because it kind of gels with the way I kind of approach the world in a very similar way. Is like, when something like this happens, go public with it. Let other people know. Make sure other people are aware of what's going on, because that's the only thing we kind of break out of this, right? It's great to kind of like talk with other people and commiserate and all that stuff. But people have to become aware of it outside of our little circles in order
They
to
absolutely do, because otherwise, we have, the votes are not going to change, because the majority is far right. So the only thing we have is getting attention to what's going on in our district. And our goal is to continue to do that.
100%. Well, listen, Diana, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Kevin.
Keep up the good work. And the other thing too, I was very psyched. I actually missed this one. You retweeted Lady Whistleton's most recent piece on the canceling of the school district plans.
Oh, yes. That was a good
I
one.
appreciate that. People should check that out too as well. It's an absolutely a wonderful thing. And and I will say it so you don't have to, is like, because she has to tell a lot of people this. No, that is not her.
I know, right? That kind of writing is awesome, but nope, not me.
It's like when I came across that for the first time, it was one of my favorite little things about like this little corner of the world.
So many people have asked, because I write, but I'm like, I wish. Not me. No.
Oh gosh. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time. Keep up the fight, and we'll do what we can on our end to kind of help amplify the work that you're doing and people doing all throughout the county. So
Thank you, Kevin.
yeah.
You're already doing a great job.
Hey, we do what we can, right? We all got to do what we can do, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Thank you all for who decided to stop by tonight and tune it in. Look forward to lots of stuff going on. If you didn't get a chance to check it out, earlier today we had part 1 of our Valentine's Day doubleheader with Stephen Caruso for the Pennsylvania Capital Star, talking about redistricting, what's happening with the maps, and where things are going to go forward, and how we got here. And coming forward, just so you know, this Friday we were probably not going to have a live show. I'm pretty sure of that. I think we might, my family and I might take a little extra extended weekend just to kind of recuperate, because we're all kind of pretty worn out. So my kids have 5 days off, so there you go. So anyways, so thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you stopping by, everybody, and thank you once again to Diana Leygerman for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see y'all in the future, everybody. Here we go. Who are the people in your world? Let's do it. See ya.